And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Morning, Nora. How you doing?
Very well, Brian. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Recovering from a little stint that kept me out for about a week, but I'm back and recovering, so that's good.
Good. Keep that up. Recovery takes some time, right?
Yeah,
It just takes some
yeah,
time. So be patient. Good,
yeah,
good.
yeah. So for those, I'll briefly say for those who didn't see the post, I had emergency abdominal surgery. My small intestine decided to turn a different direction than it was supposed to. It made a left when it should have made a right sort of thing, and it got twisted over 360 degrees. And so I've had about 18 months of stomach problems and many, many doctors later. And finally, someone figured it out. And so I went in and had that done, and I'm out, and it's a little harder recovery than it's always harder than you think it's going to be. The doctors always say, "Oh, easy. You're going to recover in no time." This has been a little slower than I wish, but it's coming. It's coming.
Well, I have to say, doctors, every single client, excuse me, I ever know who's ever had surgery, I feel like the doctor says, well, as long as the sutures are healed, I'm done and you're fine.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I could just really, because I have so many clients, and every time a client comes in with me saying they're about to have surgery, I said, well, just what has your doctor said to expect? Oh, they say I'm going to be driving in 2 weeks, whatever it is, right? Like,
Yep.
well, take that with a grain of salt and just do what you need to do and let your recovery be your recovery. Doctors always, always, always make
Yep.
it minimize what happens after a surgery, in my experience.
100%. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients say, "Oh yeah, the doctor said after a knee replacement, I'll be fine in, 6 or 8 weeks." And I'm like, you sure they didn't say months?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And what
normally
do they
what I'll
mean by
tell,
fine?
and that's just
What do
it.
they mean by fine? Like, what does that actually mean?
Exactly. And I'll tell them, I say, you will not be 100% for probably a year for almost any orthopedic surgery, just about any orthopedic surgery. When I had my shoulder resected, and all I had was a part of the clavicle removed. It wasn't a huge deal, but they removed bone. Bone takes a long time to heal. So when I went in to see the doctor after the surgery, I said, yeah, I don't expect to be 100% for probably 6 or 8 months. And he said, wow, that's very realistic. Most people aren't that realistic. And I'm thinking, that's not what you told me. I said, you said
Right.
I'd be fine in 4 to 4 weeks.
Exactly.
But
The realism doesn't come from me, man, because I don't know this. I haven't done this before. The realism should come from you, actually. But I think if
exactly.
doctors said, how long would it actually take, a lot of clients would be like, well, I don't want to do that.
I really
Right?
think
I mean,
that has a
really,
lot to
I
do
think
with it.
that's the deal. It's just a sales
I
pitch.
do. Yeah. So, it is what it is. I'm recovering. So hopefully it'll just continue on the path and trajectory that I've been on so far. So fingers crossed. Let's hope.
Very good. Yes. For a quick recovery. Everybody out there, pray for a quick recovery. That's
Exactly.
what we do.
Exactly.
Take your positive energy and throw it this way.
Appreciate it for everyone. And we also appreciate if you hit like and subscribe. Thank you for everybody who does. We really, really appreciate it. If you hit that subscribe button, it'll be downloaded every Tuesday into the platform of your choice. So whatever you listen to, whether it be Spotify, Apple, whatever it is, it'll automatically download. We really appreciate it. Check us out on YouTube as well under my name, Brian Ritchie. You can actually see us if you wish to do that, especially if we describe something and you're wondering, I wonder what that is. Note the time roughly, and then you can sort of scrub through and find it. And we can, if we happen to demonstrate it or we're holding up a skeletal piece or something like that. So you can always do it through that. And Instagram, Moving Combos at Instagram, and movingcombos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us. So yes, hit that like, subscribe, repost, all of the good stuff. We really appreciate it. So what are we going to talk about today? You mentioned something interesting, and I was like, I kind of like this idea.
So I was just up doing advanced movement principles for the upper body in Victoria, British Columbia. And, this is a course that I teach a fair bit. And what's been really interesting to me is that every course that I've taught so far, at least half the group has moderate to serious shoulder stuff going on that they're kind of just not dealing with. And I feel like many of them have done everything they think they're supposed to do, and they've gotten to a certain point, and then they just deal. So it
Mhm.
just was interesting. That's not so true of other body parts quite so much, but the shoulder seems to be something where people just kind of get stuck. And
I think a lot
one
of
of
that
the
has to do with just
yeah,
while we use our upper body a lot, it's not as though we're walking.
yeah.
When it's
No.
your knee, when it's your hip, when it's your low back, every time you put pressure on any of that area, it's a constant reminder. Well, with
Mm,
your upper body, unless it's a real huge issue, like one shoulder is super higher than the other, or it's affecting your function in some way, shape, or form, it's difficult for us to see ourselves, like our back muscles, seeing our scapula, seeing where they
mm.
naturally sit. We may be able to see in the mirror if one shoulder is slightly higher than the other, but other than that, it's really hard for us to see. We really need someone else to take a look at it. So I'm assuming a lot of people just move on when they think that they're functional.
Well, I also think like what you just said was really interesting. We can use the upper body many, many, many different ways. Right. The lower body walking is kind of walking, and it requires hip and
Mhm.
knee and ankle activation and foot movement. But the shoulder, like I can find a different way to lift my arm. I can find a different way to reach forward. I can find a different way to hold my steering wheel in my
Yep.
car because there's so many options. So I also think people cope or manage by just finding a different option to do the thing they need
Sure.
to do. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that and this is a change in thinking for me, and we've talked about this a little bit a while ago, but just to this has really gotten clear in my head. For a long time, for let's say 20, 25 years, there was this whole idea of scapular stability. And certainly in Pilates, it's like shoulder blades down, shoulder blades down, shoulder blades down. That was a thing you
Mhm.
hear in every class every day.
Yep.
And what I realized at some point in the last 10 years or so, 15 years, was okay, that doesn't actually answer, that's not actually the problem. Just bringing the shoulder blades down and causing scapular depression does not provide what you actually need to provide for many different actions of the shoulder girdle.
Mhm.
And what I find is actually more commonly missing in clients is not that depression, but is upward rotation. When the arm goes, basically anything above 80 to 90 degrees, you have to let those scapula open up and widen and really swing. And they have to, ideally, again, there's ideals and there's reality, but ideally, that bottom tip of the scapula comes almost all the way out to the side seam of your shirt.
Mhm.
It's quite a lot of motion. And so many clients I've been working with shoulder issues don't have that mobility or don't allow that mobility. So
Mhm.
what I've seen in a lot of clients is they overstabilize the scapula for all kinds of good reasons based on either their training or their activities or just not knowing any different. And then they stabilize that and then they lift their arm up.
Yep.
Uh, right. And that really just causes impingement at the where the humerus hits the acromion, because now you're jamming that up instead of allowing that scapula to lead the humerus and keep that subacromial space and that humeral head rolling appropriately in the socket. There we go. That
I
was a
was
long introduction.
No, no, no. This is something I deal with a lot, especially with women.
Yeah.
Especially with women,
Yep.
I hate to use a term of a certain age. And when I say
Of
that,
a certain
it's
age.
someone
No,
who's
absolutely.
and someone who has learned that shoulders out of ears, shoulders down, shoulders down, shoulders down, almost
Yep.
to the point that it becomes a mantra within their own head.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what I see is suddenly that shoulder blade, that scapula is not moving whatsoever. They do a
Yep.
rowing exercise, they do a pressing exercise, they do an overhead. Everything that they do, their mindset is shoulders down, shoulders down. And I
Yeah.
don't know when it was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago that I was watching a couple of different clients do this, and I said, "Now, wait a minute. Why is your shoulder blade
Exactly.
not elevating? We want that natural upward rotation as I reach up.
Mhm.
Guess what? My shoulder blades are going to rise up a little bit. They're going to move out, but they're also going to elevate." And you can
Yep.
see them say, "But I'm not supposed to because someone told me that I have neck problems. So I need to keep my shoulders out of my ears." And I said, Maybe you took it a little too far. Maybe you went a little bit too far and took something that may have been right at the moment and now is really not right for the rest of your shoulder mobility."
And not to put too sharp a point on the stick here, but Pilates has really had that as a value, the shoulders down,
Mhm.
for years and years and years, and I still hear it. And I was
Yep.
talking to some instructors too, and they're like, I mean, it really was blowing their mind. They're like, "What? I'm not bringing the shoulder blades down. That's not my fundamental way of working with the scapula." Like it really was something that they had embodied and they had really imbued in their clients for years.
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, that sometimes that's a perfectly fine thing to do. If your arms are down and you're, or let's say you're sitting at a desk, for example, and you're doing something on your computer, you probably don't want your shoulders up around your ears because that's going to be
Yep.
where they're going to end up for a lot of people. So if that's the position you're in, then bringing those shoulder blades down, sitting up tall is a very useful thing. If, on the other
Mhm.
hand, you're reaching your arm overhead to get the cereal box out of that upper shelf, or in Brian and I's case, taking our suitcase and putting it in the overhead bin in the airplane, if you're doing that without allowing that upward rotation of the scapula, you're causing a lot of undue wear and tear on the shoulder. So and it was a surprise to a lot of students in these classes.
Oh, I bet. Uh, I wanna ask you a question as a former dancer. This is a
Mhm.
theory that I've
Yeah.
always sort of had. The people that started Pilates were focusing on dance, and that
Yep.
long line, those shoulders down, arms out, that graceful line, it's always
Yep.
sort of in the back of my mind, I thought, is that what they think they're trying to accomplish? However, what 1% of 1% of 1% can make it to that high level of dance, whereas the rest of us, maybe don't need that, and especially don't need it at age 40, 45.
No, absolutely. The classic way that you often hold your arms in dance, I'm thinking of ballet, is arms are out to the side, for example, and you slide the shoulder blades down, and then against that depressed scapula, because that gives you the longest neck, right? You then take the arms up. But the thing is, you're holding the scapula down against the action of the arms going up.
Mhm.
And I was getting like impingement at that AC joint. And then
Bingo.
I again started to think about it and was talking to people and working with people and realized, well, what if I let that scapula going into upward rotation sooner? Right? Like, so instead of leading with like having, I call it my arms pulling my scapula into upward rotation, start with upwardly rotating my scapula and let them
Mhm.
lift my arms. Changed everything. Changed the activation of my arms. I was able to move much more freely, took the pain out of my shoulders, and takes a lot of stress out of the neck. Because the other thing I
Yes.
find is if you can let that arm come up and really upwardly rotate that scapula, and then I poke my upper trap with my fingers, it's not as tense.
Right.
Whereas if I try to really pull that scapula down and then lift the arms up, like my upper trap's the only thing that can do it. And that creates tension up into the neck and that kind
Mhm.
of trouble. So if I can get that scapula moving, it not only decreases shoulder pain, but often takes a lot of the stress out of the neck.
100%. I've told this story before. I'm going to reiterate it. I was working with my massage therapist, and she was complaining that she didn't feel her hands very much, numbness and tingling, and she's felt that way for years. And she
That's not good.
is mid 40s or late 40s, and you look at her, and her body looks like a Pilates instructor. She taught Pilates, she taught yoga, and whatnot. And I watched her move, and I watched her do exercises, and I said, "Do me when we were doing an exercise, I said, "Do you feel it right now?" She said, "Yeah, I can't. I'm getting numbness and tingling." I said, "Elevate your shoulders half an inch." She did that, and she goes, "Oh, there they are." So I said, "Okay, you're doing massage every day, 8 hours a
Mhm.
day.
Yeah.
Are
Mhm.
you thinking about keeping your shoulders out of Oh, absolutely, because I want to, protect my body." And I said, "Yes, but what you're doing is you're actually causing impingement and thoracic outlet syndrome. You're basically clamping down
Right.
those nerves the whole
Yep.
time." I said,
Yep.
"How about just allowing that natural freedom?" And it took us about a week to really get her feeling comfortable with where her shoulders should be at the table. And she said, "I feel stronger. I don't feel fatigued at the end of the day. I don't have that numbness and tingling in my fingers." And I said, "Now you're working with better biomechanics." Said, "Again,
Yeah.
you took something that was probably helpful at the beginning, went a little too far, or
Yep.
took a theory that was for something else and applied it to everywhere else in your life. And again, took
Yes.
it a few steps too far."
Yes. And that's what I find happens, well, for many of us that we get obsessed about the body in various
Oh
different ways.
yeah, bingo.
But certainly with the shoulder, it's like that's such a critical piece. And that mental piece is the sometimes what you have to break is actually the
Mhm.
mental piece, is the idea of what it should be. And then letting that go. Because yeah, exactly. Letting those shoulders just lift up a little bit is an interesting challenge for a lot of people because they've just trained that out of them. One other thing that I'll say there, which is interesting for me and for a lot of people, is that if you keep depressing the scapula down, 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 whatever you're doing, then what I find is that the elevators get really weak. So
Mhm.
what I often do with these clients is I also have them just lift their shoulders, just shrug, just
Yep.
lift and lift and down, just trying to create really dynamic resilience and full range of
Mhm.
motion in all those muscles that go up and down, right? That elevate and depress the scapula. And sometimes when I do that with a client who's really being over depressing that, 5 of them, they'll be exhausted.
Mhm.
Right. So they're also losing that fluidity and that nourishment of all those upper trap muscles, particularly the levator scapulae. And those muscles are losing their nourishment because they're not moving. They're getting stuck in a certain position, which also means they get more fibrous, which also means they get more painful. So all those things.
Absolutely. And we've talked about fascia before, and if you want to have something tighten up and become fibrous within the fascial tissue, don't move it.
Repeat it.
And
Just repeat.
yeah,
Yeah.
and just keep it that way for a long period of time. I've had people who have like Parkinson's syndrome who are very rounded and they've been that way for so many years. They look like a bear and their
Mm.
upper back muscles have actually forgotten how to retract. They've forgotten how to
Yeah.
move their scapula just because they've been in that position for so long. Those tissues, instead of being muscle tissue, is almost like fibrous now and not
Right.
working very well. And it takes a while for you to just get those muscles firing again, squeezing back and getting them firing. Same thing with elevation. I can't tell you how
Yeah.
many people with neck problems are so scared or who have had neck problems. Let me repeat myself, who have had 10, 20 years ago neck problems. They're so scared to do anything that involves elevation that even just
Mm.
no weights, just shrug your shoulders up. So sometimes I'll say, oh, just do some shoulder circles, just loosen things up. You got to kind of sneak it in there. And sometimes that way, and later I can say, well, you've been doing shrugs right there. Oh, really? Oh, I guess I can do that. Uh-huh. Okay.
I got to give some credit to Eric Franklin on 2 points. He has a phrase which I really like, which is slightly horrifying, but I also really like, which is practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent.
Yep.
Right. So whatever you do, whether it's good or bad, right, whatever movement pattern or tension pattern you adopt, that will become what your body becomes, because that's how our body works.
Mhm.
It adapts to the postures of the movements that we do regularly. So that's one thing. And the other thing is there's a wonderful image that he has, which I do all the time for these kind of clients, which is he has this image where you take both your scapula and you imagine that they're sponges. And they're sponges that are all full of like nice soapy water. And you're basically going to take those sponges and clean off the back of your rib cage.
Oh, I love that.
Right. So it's just like so you're scrubbing in here and you're scrubbing and you're trying to get up the top and you're getting around to the side. And
Oh, that's
it's
great.
a silly way to get a lot of spinal mobility, of scapular mobility without your students, without them going, oh my gosh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I shouldn't be doing that. It's just like, oh, just clean off the back of your rib cage with your big sponges. I love that image. And I've gotten so many clients like yours who are scared to do anything with their neck or with whatever. I say, well, just try this for a minute. Just play with me for a minute. And they're doing all kinds of things they would not have been doing otherwise. And they also start to recognize, oh, my scapula can move, which is
Mhm.
also really useful.
I love that practice makes permanent saying, and I mention it to clients all the time because, like
Yeah.
you said, for what's good, if you create good patterns, you can create
Yes.
a good habit and they can
Yes.
repeat just like you can create a bad habit. And I think with the scapula, especially because we have so many muscles that attach to the scapula, there are so many opportunities for us to begin to recruit muscles that were never intended to necessarily do a specific movement. So we have all these axillary muscles that are just like, I'll help out, I'll help out, I'll help out. So you're creating false movement patterns, even though your arm is moving to the range of motion that you think it should be, it may not be moving as efficiently or effectively as it could be. And you could be causing
Mhm.
more problems. And like you said, if you're keeping your shoulder blades down and lifting up, sure, my deltoid can lift it up there. But over time, I'm going to begin to give myself impingement. I'm going to begin to give myself problems in my shoulders. And that can only lead to bad things, you
Right.
know? I had a client
Yeah.
who started gyrotonics, and it was when gyrotonics was first becoming popular. And it was
Yep.
someone who really didn't know what she was doing, and she was forcing my client to keep her shoulder blades down, and every time you lift up your arms, every single time. And she began developing impingement.
No kidding.
And I didn't realize that it was from that. I thought it might be what we're doing.
Mm.
So I'm thinking, man, we're really not doing anything that should cause this. And now the last
Mm.
4 weeks, we've been doing things that should help this. So I don't understand why you're having this issue. And finally, I said, talk me through what you're doing. And when she said what the gyrotonics teacher was telling her, I said, okay, I don't like to go against any other teacher. However, this is how the shoulder blade should work. And when I explained it, she said, oh, it feels much better when I do that. I said, hallelujah.
Yeah. Yeah. And having done a lot of gyrotonic on the tower, specifically, sorry, I'm really thinking like, oh my gosh, trying to do a lot of those moves without the scapula
Yeah,
moving, not good. Like you're just causing impingement everywhere.
exactly.
So there's the scapula piece, which is, I think, just something to throw out there because I know,
Mhm.
certainly in my world, in the Pilates world, this is not how we often think about the shoulder. There's a real emphasis on shoulder stability. And I just want to open up that other world. Again, having talked to a lot of people through this, worked a lot of people with this, this is also something that conceptually is difficult. Clients don't have any idea how to move their scapula in upward rotation, a lot of them.
Mhm.
And like having your hands on, really working with that, finding ways to do it that are unweighted. Like a lot of times I'll have clients, let's say prone on, in the reformer on the long box or prone on the floor lying on the long box and just have their hands like sliding up the floor and sliding down the floor. So they're unweighted in that process of trying to figure out how that scapula moves. Adding
Yeah.
load to it, like going up the wall, for example, which a lot of you do after, let's say, breast cancer surgery, that kind of thing, is oftentimes too much resistance to really find that movement first. Then we work into the pattern. Then we add strength and load to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that trying to get them to move in the most efficient way possible to really get the scapula moving. I like gravity helping me, so I love putting them on a foam roller. I love putting them on something that they're lying on their back. So gravity is actually going to help their scapula sort of float to the ground. So we can
Mm-hmm.
begin
Right.
moving through some ranges of motion. So take the arms up overhead, and I can, as their trainer, I can actually get down and feel what are their scapula doing. Are they moving?
Right.
Are they
Exactly.
not? And you can do this, on even if you just have a big rolled up towel, you can do it. Anything that's going to elevate you a little bit and let your shoulder blades and just be able to move and do different patterns with your arms. Do scissors, one arm up, one arm down, do circles, wide, snow angels, whatever you want. I think really helps to get that area to relax and to open up again. And sometimes you don't even need to tell the client what they're doing necessarily. I just say, okay, I want you to do this and this. And I sneak it in there because they're lying on a foam roller. I say, bring your feet in a little closer together. Oh, you're getting a lot more core work. And now they suddenly think, oh, I'm doing core. Not really, but you are, and you're getting a lot more benefit than just that. So sometimes you sneak it in, but it works.
Yep. Yep. I love it. Yeah, the roller is great for all of that. And also, when people pull the scapula together, they can squeeze the roller. They can feel the tips of their scapula
Mhm.
or the medial border coming into it, and just getting that awoken up. That is such a critical piece. And then
Yep.
training it. So like finding the mobility and then working on having them understand. And I call this dynamic scapular control. Like, when do I want that to lift up? Because some
Mhm.
clients, their shoulders are always like up and over their rib cage, for example. Those
Yeah.
clients are very hollow chested and their scapular always kind of up and forward. Well, that's not
Yep.
helpful either. Like that's a kind of mobility, but not useful. So then it's just like, when do they move it? When do they lift it up? When do they bring it down? And then what does it partner with in the cervical and thoracic spine? That's the other thing I
Mhm.
wanted to bring into this is how that shoulder girdle immediately affects and is affected by the cervical and thoracic spine. And how do those pieces work together to create optimum movement patterns and improve posture?
Yeah, they go hand in hand, and people don't realize that. Your shoulder blades sit on top of your ribs, and your
Hmm.
ribs connect into the thoracic. And if you're sitting round shouldered all the time and your scapula are wide and rounded upward and sort of up and over your shoulders, well, guess not what? They're not going to work very well. And some of those muscles are going to get very tight, and others of those muscles are going to get very weak and very elongated and need to be worked on. And that is definitely going to affect what we see when it comes to posture, what we see when it comes to even low back pain, because we know thoracic rotation and thoracic movement has so much to do even with low back pain, that they go hand in hand. Those body parts are part, in my opinion, they're sort of, I'm not going to call them one and the same, but they're part of the same unit.
Absolutely. They're completely interdependent, completely.
Yes.
so so Brian, I have a question for you because you and I
Yeah.
have opposite thoracic structures. you
Yes,
have
exactly.
you have a thoracic kyphosis. I have none.
Yes.
Um, and I know you had Sherman's kyphosis, which is a
Mhm.
wedging of the thoracic vertebra to create a little bit more kyphosis in the
Yep.
thorax. Can you explain to me how you learn to use your upper body to optimize your posture, given that you have that kyphosis and given that you are been trying to really work on that since you were a teenager? Can you like
Yeah,
how do the shoulders work for you in that circumstance?
they don't very efficiently. I'll be the first to say
Okay,
that. I've had
all right.
impingement syndrome in both shoulders. I've had issues. I've had both my shoulders been surgically repaired. I've had to have the collarbone, basically my clavicle, resected at the ends on both sides because I had worn that down for so many years of being rounded with my basically with my shoulders forward. I was constantly grinding. There's a little disc in there where the acromion, the part of the shoulder blade meets up with the clavicle. There's a little like disc in there. Well, guess what? Sometimes that can become very inflamed, and sometimes you can actually grind it down to where there's no disc there and it's bone on bone. And that's what I
Oh,
had. It's called AC joint
wow.
impingement. And
Okay.
so they literally took off, I think he said 2 centimeters of the clavicle, which is a
2 centimeters or two
two,
millimeters?
two
Two
centimeters.
centimeters is an inch.
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah.
moly. Okay.
I
They
know.
took
And
a
when he
lot of
told
it
me that,
out.
I said, doesn't that
I'm
sound like
like,
a
wait a
lot?
minute.
He said, you still have the ligament structures. Everything's still there. Everything still works
Wow.
properly, but
Wow.
it's never going to grind again. And he's right.
Okay.
It doesn't in that sense. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, being rounded and sort of in that permanent kyphosis, there are years. I mean, I think when I first met you, I was fighting with this and I was really struggling. And it's taken me
Yeah.
probably the last 10 years to sort of get on the other side of it.
Okay.
I'm going to say it took about 5 years of knowing you, as things started clearing up. And now I don't notice it nearly as much, but I have a lot more thoracic movement. But I have
Uh-huh.
had to literally work at it like crazy. And I still work at it. It's not something that
Yeah.
there are some injuries, you have tendonitis a year from now. So how's your elbow? Oh, I
You
don't even
forget
notice
it.
it anymore.
I
Well,
forget
guess
about
what?
it.
This is not something I forget about because
Yeah.
if I sit too long in a weird position, airplanes, for instance, if I'm rounded sitting, and I hate to say
Yep.
it, but airplanes, they lose that low back and you're sort of slumped over. And by the time I get
Yep.
off, I'm like, oh, I literally want to find a foam roller or find something that I can put and just open that area up so that I
Mhm.
can get everything open. I will say for me, what really worked the best was enhancing both my thoracic extension, which you're going to laugh at because I don't have any. However, I can get closer to neutral, whereas before
Yeah.
I was so rounded. So for me, that's an
Yeah.
accomplishment. And focusing on a lot of thoracic rotation. I found
Mhm.
that I got more extension as I focused on that rotation and also
Absolutely.
focused on a lot more cervical retraction as well, sort of sneaking up on those muscles instead of
Mm.
just
Mhm.
focusing on the lower end of my thoracic, focusing on the upper portion, semispinalis, things like that, pulling that back, which really helped to pull my head back, but also elevated my chest just enough where I could say, oh, okay, this really works. This feels a lot better. And it gives me relief. And my shoulders are working better now than they ever have.
That is a really interesting story for me. Thank you. That was actually really, really helpful in thinking about so many clients, because that up and over, that roundedness, you see all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And whether again it's more kyphosis or more it's like just a collapsed posture, like you see this in. I always think of all the teenagers that I see on their
Oh my
phones with
gosh.
their backs, right? They're
Oh,
all up and over with their hands in front of them and their head down, and that's kind of where they're
oh,
living right now. And I'm
yep.
like, that cannot be good over time. So interesting, just how that impinges the shoulder, how that decreases the movement of the shoulder. And one of the things that I'll say, for those of you who aren't aware of this, when there is a lot of kyphosis, and Brian's was a pretty stiff kyphosis, right? Like you said, you can get to
Mm-hmm.
neutral now on maybe a little extension. So if you can't do that, then, and you can try this at home, round your back and lift your arms up. If you stay in thoracic flexion, you really literally lose a lot of range of motion overhead. Like that's
Yep.
just how that is. It just, in order to really bring the arms all the way up, thoracic extension, at least to some extent, is necessary to get the arms really up overhead. So
Yep.
those are like that, and that's that's the limitations that you had from that. So that's really interesting.
And also, I mean, you made mention of this once when you were standing behind me. You put your hand on my scapula and you said, your scapula is huge. It's gigantic.
It's true. It's gigantic. You have the biggest scapula I've ever seen.
Yeah. And I have a very large chest cavity, so it kind of makes sense. I've got a huge thoracic cavity, and I also have large scapula. But when those scapula are up and over and rounded, we always, when Nora and I teach about the upper body, we sort of stand there with our backs to, the crowd and say, okay, we are the exact opposites. Whereas hers
Right.
are
A,
right together.
B.
It's right there. Mine are so wide and still elevated. Even though I work at it, they still have that natural tendency because, again, I'm not as flat. My thoracic posture will never match yours. I always joke when I go to Asia that I wish I had an Asian spine because I'd love it just to be, I'll take straight. I don't have to go to an extension. I just like straight. It would be wonderful to just be able to go a little bit back further. But again, that's the way, my body was created over the years, having so much weight and all that kind of stuff. That's the way I was, again, I built my fascial suit over those years. And then it took me 15, 20 years to erase that and to get more mobility and to get things going. Now I feel as though, wow, I can actually turn my thoracic. I can actually do that without pain, without feeling stuck. And that's a huge relief for me. And again, that's where my posture is. But guess what? It's a posture I see in a lot of my clients.
It's really common. That's why I wanted you to talk it through, because I see that all the time, especially as clients get older. And especially, I'm sure you, like me, like the people that could afford me had serious desk jobs, like 10-hour-a-day coders and things like that, who then go home and play video games. That was one of my favorite things with some of my clients. Like, just stand up straight, like 5 minutes a day, people, please. But right. But that's like, that posture is just, it's built into our system. It's built into what we do every day for many, many, many people. And again, posture doesn't make perfect. Posture makes permanent. So you spend enough time in that and everything accommodates to that. Yeah.
And if you look at young people, you said it, when they're on their phones, the way they sit in class, slouched, head in their lap, looking at their phones, I say, okay, right now your tissues are very pliable. Right now, everything's working right, and you stand up and not a problem. Wait 10 years. I'm waiting. I'm literally waiting for us to start seeing. I don't know if you know this, but for a while, we started seeing certain things like video game thumb became very common.
Right. Yes. Yep.
I'm waiting for cell phone. I'm waiting for like cell phone neck. I'm waiting for, we call it text neck just because it rhymes. But I'm waiting for that to literally become something that we're going to start seeing more and more and more, because as people are using that, and my kids, they don't call their friends up that much on the phone like we used to. We'd sit there and we might get a crook in our neck because we'd put the phone underneath our ear and we'd talk like that for 3 or 4 hours.
Yes.
These kids are texting. in some of the
Yep.
worst posture. And I'm lucky, my kids have great posture and I remind them of it. But again, how long will that last? You can only hope. But all their friends, I look at them and I'm already seeing round shoulders. Backpacks, cell phones, two of the deadliest
Yeah.
things when it comes to teenagers.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So thinking about that, so bringing that shoulder and thoracic connection together. And what I loved about what you said, which has certainly been my experience, is the best way to improve thoracic extension is with thoracic rotation.
Yep.
Like that, and I will always do thoracic rotation first before I do any thoracic extension, especially if somebody's limited. If they're not limited, it's not an issue, that's different. But for most of my clients, I want to really warm that up. I want to really move that, get the vertebra moving, get the muscles activated. And then when I go into extension, there's some mobility there. There's some chance to get somewhere. Yep. The second piece for me was working with a couple of clients who were built more like you, Brian, a little more kyphotic. And, I call it just a really nice posterior rib cage, because you've probably heard me say this, but one of the things that I certainly recognized early on for a lot of clients is, or actually, I wouldn't say early on, recognized fairly recently in many ways, is how that scapula sits on the rib cage has a huge impact on the upper body strength that's available and the spinal mobility that's available.
No question.
So, for example, like when I think this one client is just a normal kyphosis is what I'll say, just a nice amount of rib cage and a nice amount of depth between her sternum and her spine. And her scapula sit on the rib cage such that I can't really see the medial border unless I kind of poke around, right? It really just sits comfortably on the rib cage. Mm-hmm. You look at something like my back or a lot of the dancer backs that I work on that are flat as a pancake. There is no posterior rib for that scapula to sit on. So the scapula always, that's where you get scapula winging, because and yes, there's weakness and other things related to that, but I would go chicken or egg. They always say, oh, that means the serratus is weak. I'm going, well, yes, probably, but I think the reason is because the scapula doesn't have a good foundation to live on. Mm-hmm. Right? Like in my back, like there's probably a quarter of my scapula that's really against my rib cage, and the rest is kind of floating off of it. And something that I've seen pretty consistently is in training upper body strength, women with that, mostly women, some men, but mostly women with that body structure, strength is much harder to build than if they've got that nice connection between the scapula and the rib cage. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. What you had said earlier, that a lot of Pilates people focus on scapular stability. I think part of the reason is because a lot of women do seem to have a little bit of that thoracic winging, just naturally. They don't have a lot of muscle back there for whatever reason. They just don't have that same muscular density back there. So they go to do something and their scapula doesn't know where to be in space. So it's a natural place for a lot of instructors to say, look, we got to make sure your scapula knows where to be. Not fixate it, but know where it needs to be, because you go to do any type of like a push-up, even off the reformer foot bar or something, and they collapse in their shoulders and chest, or they try and do anything that involves their serratus and they really can't control it. Well, it's because these muscles have never been asked to do anything like that. A lot of them, especially the clients that I have who, didn't do much sports and who are attorneys and have desk jobs and things like that. And they have that winging. So that's a smart place to sort of start their awareness. And I want to use the word awareness more than even stability, because I want them to know where their scapula lives. Because if they can feel where their scapula is, if they can begin to feel that medial border a little bit and not say, you need to pull it back against your spine. Nobody knows how to do that. You can't physically tell yourself, oh, I want you to snap that back. No, but you can say, I want you to feel where this is. Now I want you to push it against me. I want you to pull it away. You can begin to get them aware of where it is in space. And getting that awareness, I think, is so important.
Well, one of the images that I use a lot, which I may or may not have said in this podcast before, is neurologically, like our body map for most of us is as if we are a paper doll that's only printed on one side.
Yep.
Right. We don't have, most people, no awareness of our side body, that we're actually three-dimensional. That just isn't in our map. And the whole back body, whether it's scapula, spine, glutes, hamstrings, is like a blind spot. Right.
Yep.
I mean, you're talking about the mirror muscles or the vanity muscles, right? We all see the front, the pecs, and we see the arms, and we see that, but we don't see the back, and we don't not just see it visually, but we don't feel the back. Because I say the same thing. If I'm working on somebody's scapula, the first thing you have to do is make them aware that they have one and what it's doing, right? Because that is an absolute, neuro mapping, brain mapping blind spot for everybody. Really, very few clients have a sense of, oh yeah, my scapula, I know where they are, I know what they do. So and as we've talked about many times, awareness is what leads to change. So if they can figure out where it is, they can make a different choice or whatever they need to do. But until they know where it is, they don't have any access to changing it.
Yeah. One thing that one thing I focus on with that thoracic rotation, we'll go back to thoracic rotation. I think it's easier to get men on board, especially who are golfers or tennis players or something like that, or even women who are into those sports, because it can really enhance their sport.
Yes.
It can really enhance it. Sometimes I find that they don't even know that they have that limitation. So they're forcing their hips to turn too much, or they're forcing their low back to turn too much. So really getting them to be able to do more thoracic rotation can benefit them greatly, and a lot of times get them better performance for their sport. I find for some people, though, who don't participate in sports, thoracic rotation is something that they don't feel on a daily basis, on a regular basis. And something that I'll bring up to them is, when you're backing up the car, how far do you turn your head? Oh, well, I have a camera, and no, I didn't say how do you use your camera.
Right.
I said, I want you to lean slightly forward so your back is no longer on the seat back, because I can't tell you how many people, they get stuck in that seat back and it's already rounded, and they can only turn so far because, well, they're stuck on it.
Because they're already slumped. Yeah.
Yeah. So I say, I want you to sit forward slightly, and I really want you to turn your head. And I want you to really look behind you. If you need to change lanes, I want you to slightly lean forward and turn. And believe it or not, I hear a lot of them saying, wow, I can't see as far as I used to. I can't really turn my head as far. And I say, it's not your head. I said, it might be. Granted, I've got some older people who might have some arthritis, so it might be the neck. It might be cervical. However, a lot of times it's coming from that thoracic. So sometimes I have to explain to them, we need to do things that are going to help you posturally. We need to do things that are going to help you functionally through life, because I need to make sure that you can turn your head in a car, that you can turn behind you, that you can do things in the back seat if you need to, and not get injured, not have an issue. And usually those are the things that, when I can remind them and really make them aware, how far can you go in a place that's not just the gym, that they can have some measurable effects from. So 6 months from now, they're saying, oh man, I can see behind me in the car with no problem. That's functional. That's measurable.
Love it.
They feel that.
And it's useful, right? And it's
very
valuable.
Useful. Very useful.
So I wanted to go back, because again, I've gone off on my high horse. Both of us have about scapular mobility, but I wanted to bring us back to the point and what I think of as the value and the reason for scapular stability. And when we work on that, and a lot of that is like in all fours or in a plank position, right? In a plank position, you want to have those scapula organized on the back body. And then if I'm doing a push-up, I may go down, and the scapula may move as I go down towards the floor.
I have to.
If I push back up, I want them to come back to that starting position. Right. So, but in that situation, my arms are not overhead. I don't have a need for upward rotation of the scapula, because that's not what's happening.
Yep.
So I think that's a place I think about it a lot. Another place that I think about it, and I'd love to have your thoughts on this. When I watch somebody do basic arm work. So in your case, it might be cable work or band work or something where I'm pushing, let's say I'm pushing the arms forward, like a chest press, but we're open chains. On the reformer, it would be arm work facing away from, or facing the foot bar, holding the straps and reaching forward, something like that. So if I'm looking at something like that, what I find for a lot of my female clients is they come forward and then they let the scapula come forward and around. So they kind of,
Mm.
they let the scapula move, in that case, I think more than I want them to. So rather than kind of getting the scapula relatively stable and reaching the humerus away from the scapula, from the stabilized scapula, they let the whole thing kind of come forward, and I see them round a little bit in the chest and almost even open up the gap between the humerus and the scapula.
Interesting.
And I don't see that so much in men at all. And
Yeah.
I really don't see it in my more athletic women and my stronger men. That they, when they come forward, they're the scapula in place, they're comfortably supported and stable, and the humerus can work off of that. And not that you always wanted to do that, but sometimes, like if I'm pushing a car, let's say pushing a car uphill. I don't know why that came to me. I think I used to own a 65 Volkswagen bus. That may be why. But if I'm pushing something, I may want to like keep that scapula stable so that I can use like this the power coming from my legs, from my back, through my arms, instead of letting it be like dispersed by that scapular mobility. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
100%. And it's creating, especially in something like that, like a pushing motion. I was working, the last client I had today, she had a shoulder replacement, a reverse shoulder replacement, and she's actually doing very well. She's very functional, range of motion. She'll never get the same on both sides. Don't even try, but she's getting much better. But pressing is where she is sort of, that's her weakness, is pressing. And part of the reason is they cut through the anterior delt. I get that, but it's been healed. It's been plenty of time. But that's the motion. She's super strong in her back, but it's anterior muscles. And it's because her scapula doesn't know where to really be in space. And it's part of that kinetic chain. I had her doing an open chain. She was standing, pressing against something that was moving. And we did band work. And we also did something called core sticks, which are fiberglass resistance rods. And I had her doing that. And she was having a hard time. And I'm going to say, when we talk about a kinetic chain, I found that the area between the thoracic into the scapula was where the chain broke. She didn't have that connection.
That linkage was gone.
That linkage was gone. Her anterior delt was firing like crazy. I could see that firing. That's why when I was looking at it, I'm thinking she's struggling. One side is struggling. The side that's been repaired, it was really struggling. But it was struggling because she was just trying to use only the shoulder muscles and not helping it with the scapular muscles. She wasn't using the deeper muscles.
Only
she
the
really
front.
wasn't getting that kinetic chain firing. She was only using the anterior delt and pec major. And I was watching that thinking, okay, she's got muscle. It was that linkage in the kinetic chain that was missing. And for us, I'm doing a lot of things that are trying to wake up the scapula, but it's not just because, like I say, she's very strong. She's an athletic woman. She's in her early 70s, but she's athletic. She's one of the stronger people I have when it comes to everything else. Rowing, she's one of my strongest women. So it's not as though she's not strong in the posterior shoulder girdle, like I would assume someone who's missing that kinetic chain. For her, it's more the application of, I need to do this forward. How do I get everything else organized to help me with that? And that's what we need to work on.
That's a great example. Yeah, because I laugh only sometimes. I had Labrador for years. I have a complete breakdown in the link between my spine and my scapula because it just floats around like that. I could not throw to save my life. and I threw, I mean, we had a Labrador, okay? We had a Labrador for, I think, for at least 11 years, I think. I was throwing the ball for this Labrador several times morning and evening, probably 15 to 20 times twice a day for years. I never got better. And I realized, and this is one of those things that, you realize through experience, it's because that there was a break in the kinetic chain. I'm hypermobile, particularly in my shoulder girdle. And so that wasn't connecting, like the force from the ground through my legs, through my hips, through my spine was not able to connect successfully into the upper body to deliver the power. Like as soon as it got to that link, it was like, I felt like the power just dispersed, like would poof. And then really all I was doing was using my arm, which is not the most effective way to throw something.
No.
And that's right. And that's the thing. Like if you lose those connections, and that's where scapular stability sometimes really helps to enhance those connections. right? So that was one of those things I was playing with, that stability versus mobility piece, in terms of pushing, particularly pulling less so. Pulling, it really helps have the scapular mobility. Pushing though, and pressing, like I got to figure out where those scapula want to be to keep them connected into the back, to allow that force to move through that whole kinetic chain.
I think that what you just said sort of began to make sense for me in this regard. You could be very strong in pulling, rhomboids,
Yeah.
trapezius,
Yeah.
strong,
Yeah.
lats, strong. However, pressing, that's where those scapula didn't know where to be. And that's because
Right.
what muscles are attached to the scapula anterior to the body, on our anterior? Serratus anterior, absolutely. Pec minor, sure. But they're not nearly as strong. They're not nearly as beefy and bulky as the ones in the back. And their fibers are a lot longer, especially the serratus anterior. When you think about it, those fibers are a lot longer than like our rhomboids and our trapezius in that area for retraction, you know, that you're thinking, oh, okay, so my scapula really don't know how to stabilize from an anterior side of things. But from the
Right.
posterior, it really does. And when you said that, it just, I don't know if I ever put that together, thinking, yeah, where do we always see scapular stability break down? Pressing. It's always
Yeah.
when our arms are anterior. Where do, because they go to do a push-up, and what happens? Those scapula collapse.
Just
And they go to push up,
collapse.
and then they're rounded so far forward. They don't
Yeah.
know where to be in space. And really to
Right.
get them to understand where to be can be a big challenge. And a lot of people, it takes time and a lot of frustration, because the muscles may be strong enough. I may have them stand there with a fairly easy tube and do presses, and they're thinking, I can do more weight than this. So yeah, but your motion is still not perfect yet. Let's work on
Right.
fluidity of motion. Let's work on
Yep.
that. And
Yep.
that can be the big challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, but that is another piece of that shoulder action,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
getting the scapula stable when you need them stable, and really allowing that kinetic chain to have integrity and continuity from the lower body through the upper body. You know, if you're a thrower, if you're a pitcher, if you're pushing something, if you're pressing something up overhead, all of those are pressing something forward. All of those are moments when you need that connection. And when you
Yeah.
lose that connection, you really lose the strength of that whole kinetic chain. It just breaks down there.
Yeah. I think we've used this analogy before, but it's kind of like if you're doing a press, if you're doing anything that involves all those muscles that attach to the scapula have to be working together in one way, shape, or form.
Yes.
Some are lengthening, some are
Yes.
shortening. If
Yep.
I'm reaching overhead, certain ones are shortening, and some are pulling down, some are lifting up, some are rotating forward, some are rotating backwards, but they have to work together like an orchestra. Well, if the orchestra is playing
Yeah.
two different songs, it's not going to work. So we
Yes.
kind of need to train this so that everybody's playing together, everybody's singing the same song, so that it can look more fluid and the way it should be moving in space, that every muscle knows its job, knows what it's doing, and is able to move properly. And for a lot of people, I hate to say this, but people want results in my world too quickly sometimes. So they want to jump the
Mm.
weights. They want to go heavier. They want to,
Yeah.
I'm going to go from 5 pounds to 10 pounds. Well, that's 100% increase. Maybe you should find
Right.
a 6 pound. Maybe you should increase it more slowly, or make sure that your range of motion is good. Make sure that your mobility is good. Make sure everything's working properly before you load it, or more likely overload it.
Right. That your mechanic, I mean, we're always talking about quality over quantity, right? That if the movement
Right.
quality is there, then you can quantity, then you can add resistance. If the movement quality isn't there and you add a whole bunch of load to it, you're just creating bad habits or breaking something down. I mean, it's just kind of
Yep.
that simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's where we see injuries. Let's face it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's when they show up, because you
Yeah.
overdid. You pushed too far, too fast on a structure that couldn't tolerate it.
And how many of us have had people come to us after doing something? I'm just going to use CrossFit for an example, because I've had a number of people in the past, not in the last 3 or 4 years actually, but before that, regularly, because they go too heavy, too fast, too soon, and they have
Yeah.
no foundation of movement. We
Yeah.
often talk about building up a foundation of strength, but we're also
Mhm.
talking about a foundation of movement, especially when it comes to the upper body. And we really want to think
Yes.
about that. Are they working? Are they moving properly? Are their scapula moving? If I'm reaching up, if I'm taking my arms out to the side into even like a lateral raise and going up to 90 degrees, well, is one scapula moving before the other one? Am I elevating before I'm, going to outward rotation? Seeing those things and beginning to correct those before we add the load is so important. But I think a lot of people don't look at that first. They just want to sort of let's get on with this because that's what the client expects.
And one other thing I'll say, and this is how I teach this a lot to students and instructors, is specifically in the shoulder, I don't get focused on muscles. I get focused on movement, period.
Mhm.
If I can make the movement harmonious, if I can get the joints going where they need to go in the right timing, then the muscles take care of themselves. When you try
Yeah.
to cue like the serratus and cue this and cue that, sometimes that's effective, but the shoulder is always a complex situation. It's very
Yeah.
rare, unless I've stabilized my upper arm and I'm just doing a bicep curl. It's very rare that I'm doing one part of the body. I'm almost
Mhm.
always involving front, back, upside, downside, core, spine, etc. for almost any really functional upper body movement. And so if I can get
Mhm.
that movement to be harmonious, then I train in that harmony and those muscles respond and hopefully over time create better movement patterns and better strength balances and better coordination.
And if you can train your eye for that, to be able to
Yeah.
acknowledge when that harmony breaks down, you'll also be
Yep.
able to say, okay, we've gone too much. 5
Yep.
pounds was good.
Back it
6
down.
pounds wasn't. Let's back it back down. Let's go to what you
Yeah.
can do regularly, well,
Cleanly.
harmonious, cleanly, clean, efficient movement. Then we can take it up slowly after that. And I think that's the real big key here is, are they moving in harmony? Are all the muscles moving together? Are they moving
Yep.
properly? Does it
Yep.
look
Is their timing good?
Yeah. I mean, you and I have talked before. It's kind of like when you watch the body move, it's like, okay, you're pinpointing things out, yes, but there's always going to be that thing that you're like, what? That doesn't look right. Well, guess what? If you don't correct that at the beginning, that's only going to get louder and it's only going to get more
Mhm.
dysfunctional. So that's the
Yep.
sort of thing when you see those dysfunctions, when that shoulder elevates too much, or there's no shoulder or scapular mobility whatsoever. Those are the things you really want to focus on at the beginning to create harmonious movement before you load, before you really do anything else. Because then when you do load it, your chances are you're going to be able to create a more resilient, injury-free body.
Exactly. 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 Well, I think that's a pretty good note to end on. What do you think,
I
Brian?
think so. I think that works out for me. That's
All
pretty good.
right.
Well,
Nice.
thank you guys very much for joining us again. Do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button and comment, please. The more you comment, the better it helps us. So please do that. Movingcombos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us, but also check out our Instagram, Moving Combos. And for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye, guys.